Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Not in Our Towns. Whose parks are these? Our presenters this evening will be Renata and Alex. I'm just doing first names. Before we begin, Not in Our Town would like to acknowledge the land on which we are living. The land on which we are living is part of the ancient homeland and traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape people. We pay respect to the Lenni Lenape people, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in their homeland and in the diaspora. We also acknowledge the millions of enslaved Africans and their descendants on whose backs this nation was created. Not in Our Town mission statement. Not in Our Town Princeton is a multiracial, multi-faith group of individuals who stand together for racial justice and inclusive communities. Our focus is to promote the equitable treatment of all and to uncover and confront white supremacy, the system that facilitates the preference, privilege, and power of white people at the expense of non-white people and pits racial and ethnic groups against each other by upholding hierarchies based on proximity to whiteness. Our goal is to identify and expose the political, economical, and cultural systems which have enabled white supremacy to flourish, and to create new structures and policies which will ensure equity and inclusion for all. In our commitment to uncovering the blight of white supremacy on our humanity, we take responsibility to address it and to eliminate it in all its forms through intentional actions, starting with ourselves and our communities. Welcome, Renata and Alex.
Thank you, Joyce. And I'm sure everybody will like to join me in wishing you a happy birthday. Joyce, our beloved and longtime board member's birthday is tomorrow. So happy birthday, Joyce.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, everyone.
My name is Linda Oppenheim. I'm a Not in Our Town Princeton board member, and I am happy and proud to open tonight's program about the Outdoor Equity Alliance and introduce our speakers. Alex Rivera is vice chair of the Outdoor Equity Alliance. That's his short title. And at Kane University's John S. Watson Institute for Urban Policy and Research, he is presently the USEDA, that's the U.S. Economic Development Administration, University Center Director. He sees conservation and the living infrastructure of neighborhood as critical to sustainable, equitable, and broadly enjoyed community development. He lives in Ewing, New Jersey with his family. Renata Barnes, a resident of Hopewell, is the coordinator for the Outdoor Equity Alliance. In that role, she has successfully implemented programs designed to create educational, recreational, and career opportunities for underserved community members to enjoy nature and become stewards of the outdoors. She led the OEA team in creating and implementing the first Agrohood internship program that saw over 70 applicants from 7 different schools and programs. She created the annual Kwanzaa celebration that honored local farmers and initiated the Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance's seed launch, another fascinating organization. Renata led OEA efforts to partner with Legislative District 15 and the Trenton African American Cultural Collaborative to inaugurate Trenton's Juneteenth weekend and coordinated events throughout Mercer County, including the Black Farmers Market. It is with pleasure that I turn the program over to Alex and Renata.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you. Hi, everybody. And just to let you know, Linda gets much respect from me because Alex and I are hard to tie down. and Linda was saying emails to making sure that we were on point with all the information and all the stuff she needed to advertise this. So much respect, Linda.
So
I'm
worth
pretty
it.
sure, yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw you walking past my house late at night, but I can't be sure. So Linda put the work in, you guys. So this is such a great opportunity to get to share what I'm doing and what Alex and I, our organization, is doing in the Mercer County area. And hopefully we'll be able to spread our tendrils out even further from here. Some of you might know I was involved with the Hopewell Valley Race and Diversity. I still am. It is now called Hopewell Valley Together. And, you know, with COVID and everything, a lot of these smaller anti-racism groups are really looking to kind of reorg and find different ways to reach out. I don't have to tell many of you who have been involved with Princeton Not in Our Town and the work that Linda and Joyce and many others have been doing for a long time. It's hard, it's arduous. You want to take a break sometimes. And I just want to let you guys know that efforts of groups like this on the civic level make organizations like ours really work. It kind of helps grease the wheels, because I don't have to tell you how difficult this is. This is a paradigm shift. This is a thought shift. This is an awakening of sorts for smaller communities and the larger community as well. Issues of race, diversity, justice, equity, all of those things it's a road fraught with potholes and pitfalls. But I'm so grateful to be the part of an organization that sees a future, that hopes and believes and works towards a future environmentally that is more equitable, that is just, that is compassionate. And so I wanted to come to you guys tonight and share with you a little bit about what the impetus of the Outdoor Equity Alliance was and its visions and our hope. So to start, first, I should say that the Outdoor Equity Alliance is currently a project of FOVOS. We work, they are our fiscal sponsor. We are in the midst of becoming our own 501c3, and we wouldn't have gotten as far as we have without the backing and support of our friends at FOVOS, Lisa Wolf, who is our executive director, Dan Rubenstein, which I believe some of you might know, who is the president of the board there. So we're so grateful for that. Our organization started in 2019, 2020, just before COVID hit. And it was a group of educators, of business people, of environmentalists and conservationists, concerned citizens, thoughtful people, etc., who really noticed that there was a lack of diversity when it came to enjoying our outdoor spaces. And so seeing that and realizing that this was a deficit that we could not afford as a society to continue, they endeavored to form a group, and those included, let's see, Aaron Watson, Jay Watson, Ryan Kennedy, Dr. Rosetta Trees, Dr. Ngweni, Lisa Wolf, as I said, many other people. And I don't want to say any more names because, you know, I forgot a whole lot and I might hear it later. But people who really sat down and thought about the issue of equity. They got together, let's start something that's intentional. And they looked around and saw how the lack of diversity, and specifically the lack of young people engaging with one another in the environmental space. They saw that that wasn't something that was happening. And they saw that on both sides of that coin, if you will, how it was not beneficial to the young people coming up. And they endeavored to create a program that would bring these groups together. So initially, the Outdoor Equity Alliance did a stewardship internship, which brought kids from the Trenton Boys and Girls Club, together with students from the Hopewell Valley Central High School, brought them together. They worked on trails. They learned about the environment, generally and specifically about stewardship, what it means to tend or to care, being deliberate about how we are in the earth. Their idea was to bring them together with projects so they would have interactions with one another, with the knowledge that if we all tend to crest, if you will, the wave of all this environmental issues that are going on, climate change, waste, etc., everybody needed to be at the table. We needed everybody's needs, and everybody meant a very diverse group of people. So Lisa Wolf and others endeavored to start this, and they did. Here comes COVID, bang, throws a wrench into everything, but they continued to have things online. And when I came on board, which was in the fall of 2021, was it? The fall of 2020, I'm sorry, the fall of 2020. That was when, COVID was raging and these types of things. And we had to sit back and think about how we would go on ahead with this program. So we looked back at what we did. We looked at the people we reached out to, who we wanted to reach out to, and asked ourselves a couple of questions. Can we do more? How much further can we reach out? Who should be hearing this message? How should we continue? And what does this mean in the greater world? How will people receive it? We knew that for the most part, most of the people in our organization at that particular point were not a people of color, and were not visibly in any other marginalized group. So I'm speaking in broad generalities here. So we wanted to make a conscious effort, because what we don't want to be at the Outdoor Equity Alliance, we're not trying to be a white savior group. We're not trying to save anybody. We're trying to help people glean the tools to save themselves. So I want to stop right here, and I want to talk about the three things that are kind of serve as the foundation of what we do. First, it is to make the outdoors, open spaces, parks, trails, and preserves welcoming and accepting to people of color. These spaces are not always that way. So we endeavor to create opportunities, experiences, programming, if you will, to bring people, to invite them to enjoy the outdoors. Secondly, our desire is to create a feeling of a reality, rather, of commitment, environmental engagement with nature, working towards a sense of stewardship and environmental responsibility. And thirdly, one of our goals that's near and dear, and I know it's near and dear to Alex's heart, is to create such a stream of diversity in the environmental sector with people of color and other people who have traditionally been left out of that. So that is kind of what we do in a nutshell. And how we do that is, as I started off with telling you, is through the internship programs. So let me jump back here to the fall of 2020. Lisa Wolf and I sought to implement an avian internship, a birding program where students would learn why birds are important to the environment. I was a little sketchy. I was like, wow, birds, that's really interesting. I didn't know that much about birds, but I certainly was able to learn some things about them, and really came to appreciate the part that birds play in the environment. So before I go on, and I'm giving Alex a chance to jump in here too, one of the things that we sought to do, and that was really difficult, was really connecting, because one of the issues that I know that I was shocked about was just how tangible inequity was, and how our program is set up. We do Zoom sessions during the week, and then we have field trips on the weekend. And we found in something as common or that we all take for granted is internet access.
Renata, you got muted. But it's just been a couple seconds.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I think I was talking about just the inequities in online communication and access. We would find that some of the students didn't have reliable internet, as opposed to some of the students who were taking or doing their Zoom calls from their cars or wherever. And that was something I think that was a real eye opener. I guess we had talked about it, but to actually see it in action was really interesting. And it was there that we had to sit back and really examine the depth of what it means to have equitable access to things. If you don't mind, I want to stop here and I want to give Alex a chance to say to kind of catch up and move on from there. And then we'll come back. Is everybody good with that? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right, great. Alex?
Thanks, Renata. I want to jump really quickly into some of the content of our internships. So our two main internship programs, the Agrihood and Careers in Conservation program, share a really critical curricular element. So one of the things that we strive to do is to educate students and give them some of the language and knowledge necessary to understand how historical social influences have impacted the distribution of environmental and agricultural resources. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly to give you all some insight into like what the students learn and see. All right, so what you see in my screen now is a redlining map of Trenton. So when we, in one of like our first interactions with the students, we teach them the fundamentals of understanding spatial inequities in our community. So I'll show them this redlining map. And, you know, I'm going to assume that the people in this crowd know a bit about redlining. So there's going to be some things that I skip over. I'll show them this redlining map and, you know, I'll show them the history of redlining. And then I start showing them the way that, you know, some of these communities that are now experiencing a lot of disparities in environmental quality or land use, you know, how did we get to where we are today? So in case anyone's not super familiar with redlining maps, I am going to kind of go through the commentary of that. So this neighborhood here aligns with a few areas of Trenton. One of the core neighborhoods here is Coalport. Coalport is one of maybe like 3 or 4 neighborhoods that make up this area of modern day Trenton. So this area has received a lot of quote urban renewal. And as you'll see, this neighborhood specifically has a really significant environmental burden. So in this area, you know, the use of the word infiltration of here is just really nasty and demeaning and dehumanizing. You know, you guys can read what this is. It is what it is. It's really a great example of why we find ourselves in some of the community situations that we find ourselves today. So you see this area of Trenton. I'll jump over with the students to showing this on another map. And so let's say, all right, so we see this area and we know that it's associated with divestment. How does that align with kind of the distribution of environmental resources? So I'm going to turn on the Brownfield Inventories layer, and what you see here, the kind of like black squares are brownfield parcels, excuse me, in the city of Trenton. So real quick, if you're not familiar with a brownfield is basically a site with known environmental contamination and pollution. So you'll see if we kind of zoom out to this redlining map that a lot of the brownfields are concentrated in this redlined area, kind of around here on the margins of these redlined areas. So here, the areas of Trenton that have received most significant divestment, most of the brownfield sites in the city are located in that area. So that's an example of something that we communicate and share with the interns to kind of give them this context early on for understanding the information that we'll later share with them about conservation and agriculture. Another thing that I want to point out that's kind of like related to the language and what we focus on in conservation is this connecting habitat across New Jersey layer that I just turned on. All right, so what you're seeing here is a tool provided by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, kind of showing where there are critical habitat corridors and how those corridor, giving examples of areas that it would be good to intervene in for conservation to support critical habitat corridors. So one of the challenges that conservation has had since its inception in modern America is that there's this idea that nature is something pristine and that you don't want to have interaction with it. And there are these habitats that are untouched by people and they're so great and they need to be preserved. When in reality, we know that indigenous and native peoples all over the world have had a really critical role in shaping their environments and their habitats and their ecosystems to serve their needs. So one of the things that I like to point out is that DEP's tool here, and I completely understand why it does this. This isn't a criticism, but just kind of like an example of kind of some of the thinking in conservation, where this really heavily urbanized area of Mercer County, encompassing Ewing into Pennington, into Hamilton, is kind of shown as an ecological wasteland where, you know, if you're looking at this one layer, you might say, hey, it's not worth making an investment in this community. When in reality, conservation is much bigger than plants or animals. It's really about relationships. So not only relationships between plants and animals, but also people's relationship with their land. So we're providing that context to interns, kind of helping them understand the social forces that shape the landscape that they see today. I'm going to take a second to stop there for Renata to talk a little bit more about the content of the programs, and then I'll pick up talking a little bit about kind of like some follow-up projects and things that we're hoping to build on from our core internship programs.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alex. And in line, when Alex was talking about the land, if you notice, that was also, he was talking about the land, he was talking about relationships with the environment. And that is definitely, if you listen to some of our core tenets at the of the OEA, that's expressly what we're talking about, is the relationship that people have with each other and to the land. Of all the differences that we have, the one thing that we all benefit from, and the one thing that we all depend on, is the environment. So affecting people's relationships and how they interact with the land is imperative, which is why we're so passionate about what we're doing. For our two internships, our agri-hood, I have that T-shirt on. I don't know if anybody can see it. There's the cityscape of Trenton. In our internship, we made it a point to really focus in on the land, which is easy to do when you're talking about agriculture. So I'm going to put a couple of things in the chat later on, but I wanted to certainly put our brochure in there so you would get a chance to see the farmers who we utilized. Our agrihood was a 16-week program. It was so long because we had to account for spring breaks and stuff. We're not going to be doing that probably this year. We had about 7 farmers from 7 area farms that were working with us, and they were varied. We had urban farms, we had suburban and rural farms, we had some gardeners involved, and it was absolutely amazing to see the kids interact with those farmers and on the land. I wanted to show you guys the book that we used last year. It was Farming While Black, and it's by Leah Pennyman. I hope you guys can see that. That is the book that we used last year, and we gleaned all of our lessons from that book. So we had 12 lessons. We had 6 web. I think we had 6 or 7 web Zoom meetings, and then we had our field trips. We wanted to focus on farmers of color. And so we went to Capital City Farm in Trenton, which is administered by the county. And that was right smack in the middle of Trenton, because we wanted kids to see where their food came from. And yeah, that's a very popular trope. We hear that all the time, but it's so important. We also went to Wildflower Farm, which is out on Pennington Harborton Road. And that is owned by farmer Tamia McQueen. It's an African-American woman who is, 42 acres, chickens, ducks, geese, turkeys, and sheep that she raises and processes herself. We did Lamberton Street Garden. We didn't get a chance to go there, but we did interact with Tyrell Smith. That is administered by let me get this right, all these acronyms, you guys. The Trenton South Ward Neighborhood Association is administering that garden. It is a community garden. So the kids got an opportunity to see many different kinds. They went out to Howe Living Farm. They planted potatoes, I believe collard greens, kale, and lettuce. They were over at Cherry Grove Farm with Matt Convert, and that was what we did in the winter. They were in a greenhouse, and they planted, I believe they planted lettuce and cabbage there as well. So we wanted kids to understand, our interns rather, let me call them interns. We wanted them to understand about the land. And we also wanted to acknowledge and talk about the difficult relationship that African-American people, Indigenous people, and Latino people have with the land, specifically in this country. And to that end, our desire is to instill in our interns a sense of possibility. These are areas that you don't normally see people of color in because of our complex history. Now, I know that many of you might be familiar with the admission of the USDA last year, where they came out and admitted that to years, decades and decades of misrepresentation, policies that discriminated against people of color in specific when it came to land, loans, grants, and equipment. And I don't know who else was shocked. Most of the people that I knew who were involved in agriculture were not shocked by this. But that admission really opened up a reality when people say things to me like, well, there's not racism when it comes to the land. And my comment is, really? So we were able to use some of this information in our internships with the kids to kind of get them to understand why this should be important to them. If I could shift to our careers in conservation, where our interns dealt with forestry. They were focused solely on Cadwalder Park. We were surprised, I think Alex and I were both surprised how many students had never been there, who lived in Trenton and who had not been to Cadwalder Park and who knew very, very little about it. So we focused on some of the basics. We took the interns around. They used a program called iNaturalist, where they were able to look at plants and trees and identify them. We were able to spend time at the Ellerslie Mansion, get a little information from Randy Baum, who I believe is one of the directors of the Friends of Cadwalader Park there, and get some history about the park. Unfortunately, some of you guys may have been there. There's a lot of dead trees. Am I right, Alex? A lot of dead trees in Cadwalader right now.
Yep.
So there's a lot of refurbishing. So we use that opportunity with our interns to get them familiar with why natural spaces in urban areas are important. And I think Alex is going to touch on things like I think it's heat islands, et cetera, about why this interaction in urban spaces is so important. Our interns were able to take water samples. They were able to plant native wildflowers and trees, making up for some of the ones that are being cut down and that are destroyed. And again, we had such a bumper crop, if you will, of interns apply. Again, our grant only allows us space for 20 interns. We had over 40. And it was very tightly packed. We did that particular internship in 10 weeks. At the end of the internship program, which was June 4th, both our agrihood and our careers in conservation, I think we were able to graduate from our program 38 students, which is more than we've ever had. So many students wanted to come back. So many people were just learning about what we're doing. They were so impressed and they were so impassioned, so curious. And that is what we want. That is what we want to see happen. I know not everybody's going to be an environmentalist or a farmer, but what we do want, we want people to be better citizens. We want people to understand how to work with nature, that it is a collaboration. Nature and birds and so on, they are not the uncredited extras in the story of our lives. We work together. We treat nature a specific way, it treats us the same. We talked about things like health disparities. We talked about things like property values. We talked about all types of things like this, and the light bulbs that were coming on in the kids' heads, the questions they were asking, understanding the importance of trees, understanding that the environment was something that they could take part in, they could enjoy. If I may, our students came from, let's see, I know I said 7 different schools and programs. We had African Americans, we had Latinos, we had East Asians, South Asians, Muslims, Middle Eastern people. We had someone who was homeschooled, people from the islands. We had immigrants, we had undocumented people. It was an amazing coming together of different young people that assured me and reminded me how important this mission is going forward. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and for the passion to do this kind of work. So our program, we use the book Farming While Black. I just want to hold this up. This is the book that I'm reading for this year.
Hey, Renata, real quick. I'm sharing my screen because I want to share something with everybody, so they can't see your book right now. Can I cover something real quick?
That hurts me, but they'll see my book later. Thanks, Alex.
Okay. So, and just to give some context, I consider myself more of a conservation and environmental stewardship professional. So a lot of what I say is I'll say that word when I actually mean, kind of connecting it with agriculture and our overall connection with natural space. So I just wanted to put that out there to everybody real quick before I proceed. So Renata talked about Capital City Farm, and for some reason it is not showing up as preserved open space, but this area that I'm outlining with my mouse is the Capital City Farm in Trenton, and you will see that it is a brownfield. So this is a converted brownfield. That project must have been completed maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. So a lot of what Renata's touching on has to do with people's relationship to the outdoors and the environment. And for many reasons, a lot of it due to colonization and disrespect of indigenous culture and values, we collectively have lost our connection to the land. So I actually worked on the initial community engagement team that was established in Capital City Farm, and a lot of the outreach that we did in this neighborhood regarding the farm and what it would look like and what kind of programs and services it would offer was conducted in this neighborhood that I'm outlining here. One of the things I heard that I still think about is, I was talking to somebody just about the prospects of having like fruits and vegetables and the community being part of it. It was a Black guy that I was talking to, and I was saying all this stuff to him, and he's like, "Why are you trying to bring me back to the plantation?" And I didn't really know what to say that at the time, but if I were talking to that person today, I would say that that response is kind of the culmination of an ongoing degradation of our relationship and cultural values when it comes to our relationship with the outdoors. So for that kind of we don't want that type of attitude or approach to continue on to the next generation. So our agrihood programs and our careers and conservation programs are really about kind of overcoming a lot of these cultural barriers and values barriers that aren't anybody's fault, or it's not that one culture values the outdoors more than another. There are a lot of systemic barriers and long culminating societal trends that have resulted in us having really poor relationships with the outdoors. So Renata, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was important in the context of what you were sharing.
Great, thanks. Thanks. And that's absolutely true. I mean, and I know we might harp on that a bit, but the weight of the past has a lot of bearing to what's happening now. And part of our mission, as I've said a couple of times, I believe, is actually changing that narrative so that people of color, whether it's the genocide and the land theft with Native and Indigenous people, whether it's the enslavement of African peoples, and whether it's just the lack of ownership and the distance that's placed with the Latino experience in this country with the land. We want to change that narrative, not to make those things untrue. There's nothing we can do to do that, but to let people know that that is not the whole of the story. The people who this directly affects and those in the dominant culture. So that is huge. And by changing that narrative, one of the things that I like to remind people and that Alex touched on was like slavery of the enslaved Africans was not the beginning of that story, was not the beginning of that agricultural history for those particular people. Neither was tending the land or sharecropping or working in fields and gleaning fruit. That was not the beginning of the story for Latino people either. And I think by allowing these groups to see the fullness of the story specifically, and that actually, if you look at Trenton, that's the growing population right now is the Latino community. Changing these narratives and allowing a fuller picture to come forth means a stronger community. Giving opportunities for these particular groups to become self-sustaining as far as it comes to things like their food. There's a self-determination that is birthed there that is going to be beneficial, not just to those communities, but especially to those communities, but also to the rest of us. And being involved in something like the Outdoor Equity Alliance is really something that can really help get a solid footing for things like land ownership, vocational, educational, and civic responsibilities and activities as far as the environment is concerned. And so that's another thing that we want to focus on is getting people involved. And so Alex and Linda, if it's okay, can we stop right here and can we take a few questions? Is that okay?
Sure.
Great, great. So if
Absolutely.
anyone has questions, I would love for you guys to ask us now. I will just go on and talk about just this book real quick that Alex wouldn't let me show you before. But this is the book that we're going to do this year. And it's called The Color of Food. And it talks about things like food insecurity and the act of growing the food in community. And what I mean by all the students got a copy of Farming While Black. I don't know if it's in our budget to get them this book, but that's certainly one of the books that I'm using as my reference material, as we're all working together and forming the academic part of the internship. So anybody have questions? The chat looks bare.
Was there anything that was particularly, oh, we do have a question. Linda Oppenheim has a question.
Okay.
Hey, this is so exciting. It's everything that I imagined when I first talked to you about it, Renata. There's so much that any one of the concepts you brought up could have been a whole program. So rich. It's wonderful the young people you've been able to attract. What are your thoughts about continuing their interest? I understand not everybody's going to become a conservationist, but I'm thinking like an alumni group, or how do you not lose, how to support that interest and see that they carry it on and attract others.
Wow. Alex and I just had this conversation today. It's actually been an ongoing conversation. I'm gonna let my colleague take this one. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Linda. That was a spot on question, because if we didn't stop for questions, this is what I was gonna go on to talk about next. So Renata has mentioned that, you know, we want to do a do with, not a do for approach for communities to build their relationship with nature. They really have to decide what that looks like. We can broadly build awareness, help them build skills, help them build knowledge, and equip them with tools, but ultimately the implementation is up to the people living there. So as part of our programs, one of the things that students have to do is a final project. So it's kind of like a little bit of a capstone to what they have learned. So one of the final projects for the Careers in Conservation internship was actually this tree mapping project in Cadwallader Park that has since grown and really blew up, and has engaged 5 of our interns in post-internship work. So this is paid work that, you know, they're getting paid to do because we have a contract with the city of Trenton to work on this. So what you see in front of you is a map of all of the trees in Cadwallader Park. There's about 1,500 trees, and we are mapping the trees in preparation for grant application to NJDEP's Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative Climate Change Grant. So as part of those grant activities, we need to do a carbon sequestration report of our project areas, and Cadwallader Park is one of the project areas. So we've engaged our interns to go out and collect information, update a tree inventory of Cadwallader Park that was completed about 20 years ago. So I'm going to click on a point just so that you all can get a sense of what the interns are doing. Oh, I can't click on that one point. Oh my gosh. All right, let me click in a more densely. All right. So the interns are collecting, in this one they didn't know the species, but they're collecting information about the species of tree. It's DBH, that means it's diameter at breast height, and the canopy coverage, or excuse me, the percent of the living crown. So when they take a DBH measurement, that allows a program called iTree to get an estimate of the amount of carbon sequestration that tree is performing. So we're going to run a report for all of these points in Cadwallader Park, and that's going to guide the grant application that a consortium of organizations is putting in. So one of the key things that we want to do is build skills in conservation and agriculture. And so securing follow-up projects like that is really critical to the ongoing and future work of OEA. So this, for example, is just a start that we can support the Cadwallader Park Alliance in kind of further refining the inventory or making project plans based off the inventory. We can support the city of Trenton in tree inventory projects for other parts. So we're not only building skills, we're also kind of building this data that neighborhood groups and associations need to kind of advocate and plan how they are going to implement projects in their own community. So I think that kind of the short to midterm future of OEA programs is definitely seeking opportunities to help people implement conservation and ag projects in their communities, both kind of like at the upfront and providing ongoing support in maintaining and managing those projects, whether that be through, deeper skill building, through deeper knowledge building and data collection and data support, and also equipping them with tools. Renata mentioned one of the tools as kind of like land ownership and land trust. I would say that that's kind of far off in OEA's trajectory at this point, but it's something that we're thinking really deeply about. I'm sure this audience knows that kind of land ownership and your ability to participate in decisions that impact land was a critical way that people were disenfranchised in political and social processes from before the inception of the country to now. So we would really like to be able to put people in positions that they're kind of really ready for land ownership and land management. Again, it's something that's kind of nebulous and maybe far off, but I see that as kind of critical to OEA's future, being able to support people with tools and legal structures where they can say, we're gonna own this land, we're gonna manage this land, and we are going to do it in a way that is aligned with kind of these natural and community oriented uses, and also uses that are about relationships. It's about people's relationship to a place, in addition to the relationships between people and wildlife, and just creating a place that is kind of dense with relationships, whether those be between people or people and animals.
Thank you so much, Alex. We have a question in the chat from Heidi Fichtenbaum. Are ANJEC and Sustainable Jersey supporting this effort with grant money?
The OEA program specifically, Heidi?
I expect any of your, yes, she says.
No, I don't think so. Renata, do you think that no, they are not is the right answer?
No, they're not. They're not. No. No.
Not to say that we wouldn't welcome a conversation with them, but yeah, as of this moment, no.
Thank you. What was the most surprising thing that, I imagine, it's always a learning journey, but working with youth, what was the most surprising thing you saw them learn, I guess?
Let me, can I take this one first, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there were two things that stood out in my mind, actually three. One was when we were doing the Black Farmers Market this summer for the Juneteenth thing. Someone had come up and was really surprised because Farmer Tamia had brought some eggs, and she has about 6 or 7 different varieties of chicken. This person had commented that she thought it was amazing that Tamia had painted all the eggs before she came here. And I thought that was so amazing. It was funny, and then it wasn't. Their only experience with eggs had been white eggs in the store. And that spoke to so many things. But I thought to myself, this was very interesting. Second, the experience is when Alex was in our Agrihood Zoom, and he was talking about the redlining. And we have a young woman, a young girl who is a recent immigrant from China. And, you know, he had kind of zoomed in, and the kids were able to see some of their streets. And she was so floored. And she said, "Oh my goodness, I live in the hood." And she was so shocked. And she had said to me later on our way to a field trip, she said she could not believe that someone would deliberately do this, would deliberately put people in a place where they couldn't have things. She was so floored by that. And I thought that was interesting. And the other thing was, you realize what the lack of exposure does. It makes your world very small. And I think probably one of the most poignant things for me was when the kids had realized how small their world was. So that was probably it.
So I can chime in. So Capital City Farm, it's in my neighborhood where I grew up. So it's right there. I walked past that area on my way to Trenton High. And because my parents were redlined into an area that was just designated for, low-income African Americans. And it's interesting, Renata, growing up, our street ended at, can you believe it or not? Well, there was a junkyard and the Assapeque Creek. And so what I would do is every afternoon, I would go down to the creek because it was water, it was green, it was like rocky, and it was a real creek. And I was so fascinated with that. So and thinking about the kids today who don't have an opportunity. Of course, I do a lot of outdoorsy stuff, but had it not been for my mother. The kids today, you're absolutely right. They don't know where eggs come from, really, other than the supermarket. And I like the connection between people and the land and earth. And working with the kids at Wildflower Park and naming the trees is excellent. So thank you for that. But I just have to chime in. Capital City Farms, that was my neighborhood. And you see how blight it is. It's right in the middle. Yes, it's very blightful.
Well, it's also very segregated as well. And that's one of the things that, you've got, I'm a New Yorker. So, it's like you get Harlem at 110th, but now I think they've actually pushed Harlem to 125th to start. But then you have the Upper East and the Upper West that are on either side of of Central Park. And then you have 57th Street at the bottom with the Plaza Hotel. And it's not that different at Cadwalder. You have all those homes at Cadwalder. You have I think it's Hiltonia Boulevard, and then you have all the Hiltonia estates. And there's such a marked difference to that park and the people who were involved in that. And now that Trenton's like the hot new girl at school, you've got everybody, you've got developers clamoring to do things in Trenton. Part of our mission is to make sure that basically no one gets left behind. The reality is that as they're buying up or the city is kind of hoarding land and then maybe selling it to whatever developers there, the same people who are historically and constantly disenfranchised from the environment, from the opportunity to be self-determining and self-sustaining are again, the same people who are going to be in the same position yet again. And by working with the youth, and it's not just the youth, because yes, we get that the youth is the low-hanging fruit. And I just mean that it's easy to get kids to get in a program than it is older people. Yeah. But part of the OEA vision is kind of what Linda's, harkening back to Linda's question is, this doesn't work unless grown folks get involved. That's a lot of weight to be putting on young people. So part of our mission too, and Alex was talking about, is engaging the community. And I do struggle with using some of these terms because you hear it all the time. But in order for this to satisfy, to work and to have some legs and some roots, grown folks have to be involved. People my age, people your age. Kids are going to look to see themselves 10, 20, 30 years down the road. We need to be there to show that this is important. And organizations like ours need support. We spend a lot of time trying to get money for these programs, and just basic operating expenses. And we pour a lot into these kids. And I remind these kids, which is why our internship pays them. We pay you because we value your time, and I want you to value ours as well. And it's really quite interesting. I mean, there's a lot of growth going on in these students. And all of that stuff, I know I threw a lot of stuff into the pot right there, but all of these things kind of come together and form a really good stew that I think is really going to be imperative to make sure this work goes on. Again, I'd like to see these programs that we're implementing, especially with the what comes after, well established after this, and having other people administer them, creating opportunities for both the community and for our interns to be more deeply involved in the environment. This is no joke, and I don't have to tell half of you guys what's going on. You know what's going on, both ethically, both as far as diversity and all these kinds of things are concerned. This work is imperative.
I want to share really quickly some of my personal story because I didn't really get a chance to jump into that. But Joyce, you're sharing that you grew up near Capital City Farm and you kind of like remember what it is. And you went to develop your own relationship with nature at the Assunpink Creek. I think that that's really cool. And it reminds me a little bit of some of my experience. So I grew up in Trenton. I grew up in South Trenton, and I lived in Trenton for about 25 years. I did not have any relationship with nature at all until I started, kind of like going places by myself and, walking places by myself. And I'm going to share my screen real quick because there's something that I want to show you all that I think is important. So what you are seeing here is Roebling Park, which is Mercer County Park Commission facility. This is part of I'm trying to think of the order in which I'm going to tell you things. All right, it's Roebling Park. For right now, it's Roebling Park. So this is like the first what I would call natural area that I went to, and I started developing my own relationship, my relationship with nature. Now I would say nature is everywhere, and you need to cultivate it where you are. But this wasn't too far from my house, so I started walking over here. And for me, I just noticed that I felt different after being immersed in this space and kind of like disconnecting in it. And it felt really good. That was maybe when I was like 16, 17. It didn't really latch on. I was much more comfortable walking around here, other areas of Trenton, rather than going into the woods by myself. Of course, over time that changed, but that's kind of like what I was contending with and what I was dealing with as I was making this transition in my life. So I just wanted to share that, I didn't come to this like loving trees, and I didn't grow up with that kind of ethic. That was something that developed over time. It was really out of sync with my lived experience and kind of like even the person who I thought that I was. But I want to talk more about Roebling Park because this is part of the larger Abbott marshlands. And oh, it's been a while, so I'm forgetting the first name, but this Abbott guy was archaeologists, and this area of Roebling Park is really critical to understanding the archaeological history of the Lenape Native Americans. So there are a bunch of archaeological artifacts that were found here by Abbott. Unfortunately, it's called the Abbott marshlands, right? Even though, he didn't really have anything to do with kind of the he didn't have the connection with the land that was kind of built over generations and passed on through culture and heritage. He just so happened to find these artifacts of the Lenape Native Americans. So I kind of just wanted to share that because I thought it was something very important and tangible that people today can kind of see some of the challenges that we have in conservation. Like, it's really cool that this area is conserved and that there is not going to be any additional development here. Ecologically, this is the northernmost freshwater tidal marsh on the Delaware River. That type of habitat is really rare globally, so it's super important that it be preserved. But preservation itself and conservation of the land itself isn't quite enough. It needs to be conservation contextualized by history and culture. So the Park Commission does do some educational programming and promotion of kind of the history of this land as it relates to the Lenape. There's definitely room for more, right? And it's not just on the Park Commission to be able to do that. It's kind of up to the people here who say, hey, we want to be part of promoting that part of conservation, or we want to learn more about this. So let's talk about having programs and additional services related to that. Roebling Park is really cool. There's a lot of information about it out there. I'd be happy to talk more about this, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a couple of, there's a lot of, ideas in the chat, and I want to pull out Christine Symington's question. The Municipality of Princeton is updating its community master plan, which includes a land use element and an open space recreation/conservation element. What advice do you have to ensure that those historically excluded in Princeton are involved and that the plan addresses their needs?
I would say to really ask them. There's a woman in Princeton, I think some of you might know her. Her name is Dana Hughes Moorhead. Does anybody know her? I've been connecting with her lately, and she's also very committed. She works with a company called Farm and Wilderness. I believe that's Farm and Wilderness. And they have, and this also speaks to someone else's comment about camping. They have campsites and such up in Vermont. But we actually had spoken about what that would look like, for the town of Princeton. Creating fields where everybody, recreation, all kinds of things that would kind of expand and maybe deepen the use of open spaces by people of color. And I said, I think that one of the things is to maybe get involved with what's happening historically. Now, there is a project in, I want to say, I believe it's on the Schuylkill, and it's through trails. They have stories that you can access via an app on your phone when you take these walks, and you can interact with them that way. Kind of think like geocaching, but it's really just highlighting what's going on in that particular environment that you're in. That is a great way, a great introduction to getting people to actually forest bathe or to walk in the woods and to understand where they're walking. You can make it historical. You can create a mystery. You can do like a bird walk or a shrub walk, where people can learn to identify different things in that surrounding area and be familiar. They can use the eye naturalist and learn things, learn what flora and fauna is all inside that particular environment. I also think that maybe finding, like, one of the things I wanted to do was create a cricket pitch. We have a growing South Asian community. And I'm like, what a great opportunity to have one culture introduce something to another culture and to build something like that instead of another basketball court or another soccer field or baseball field. And not that there's anything wrong with those. Let's just mix it up a bit. So.
I don't think that I have anything particular to add. A lot of it is just like grievances I have with how things are characterized in open space and what open space policy is, but it's not relevant to this, so I'll pass on that.
Someone had suggested Chris Bolden Newsom at Sankofa Farms over at Bartram Gardens. A lot of these people are colleagues of mine through the CDRW, which is the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed. And I speak to some of these people on a monthly call. I like a lot of the work that Sankofa is doing as far as urban ag is concerned. Philly John is another one. There's a seed company called True Love Seeds in Upper Darby. So in that aspect, we've been able to connect with a lot of people in urban ag, thinking specifically of what our agrihood is about. I've had great talks with the USDA, the government, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm really just excited about the opportunity for to grow this particular part of the OEA, to see how urban ag really works for these communities and how we're able to really affect that. We've got great people who are willing to work with us and partner with us, from local farmers to Duke Farm, to so many people who are behind, seriously, not trying to save people, but to give people access and tools to save themselves. We belong to the Northeast Farmers of Color, and we also belong to NOFA. And we've spent time with these organizations trying to create inroads, solid inroads. And these are places that we need everybody. People, no matter where you're from, you can make a conscious contribution, a deliberate contribution to these efforts. And we're excited for what can happen. So I'm curious as to, you've heard our presentation. I'm curious as to how you as a group see how is it that you can affect the work of the Outdoor Equity Alliance and groups like us. And also, how do you see it as individuals? How do you see where you can affect it and how it affects you? So I would love to hear some answers to that. I don't think that people think deeply enough about those things, and I'm really curious.
If I can go back to something that you said in connection about saving people. And very early in the presentation, you brought up the phrase white savior. And I'm not sure everybody here is familiar with the phrase.
Oh.
Not in our town. One of the things we're concerned about are attitudes and biases and awareness of biases and people, and the real difficulty, particularly for people who are good people and want to do good. And I'm thinking of people in the majority for the most part, but not exclusively. And when you run into that kind of an attitude, if you want to explain what it is, and when you encounter it, what kind of responses do you have? How that's part of, to me, that's part of the teaching. And how do you go about doing that?
I wanna address that myself because a lot of my career has been working in government and nonprofit, serving divested communities. So I think I'm sorry, Linda, do you want us to define that for people first, or
I think it would be worthwhile to define it first and then talk about how you've dealt with it.
okay. So my working definition of the white savior complex is generally if you are taking an approach of a do for rather than do with, and not working consistently to address systemic challenges and barriers in whatever kind of your topic of interest is. So for me, like, I've reflected a lot on my career and some of the things that I've done, and I think that that has definitely been part of some of the initiatives and programs that I've been a part of. So I think addressing it is a lot about reflection and just having self-awareness in what it is that you're doing. And I think part of it comes from like performance pressure and pressure to get results on certain things. So I think a lot about maybe like grant culture, and you're supposed to do things really fast, like you're supposed to get a lot done in a couple years, and there's a lack of ongoing support for long-term initiatives that really build a community's capacity to do certain things. So I guess I don't really have a particular suggestion for avoiding it outside of being mindful of what it is that you're doing, being mindful of kind of like who it is that you're around and talking to on a daily basis when you're doing your work. Like, I find that Renata is connecting with the groups I would never connect with because of the space that I'm in. And I can see some of the challenges that I would have in administering OEA programs because of that. And Renata's more in like on the ground community space than I am, and that's a challenge. So being aware of who you're around and being mindful of what it is that you're doing as an organization. So for me, I would like, as tempting as it is and how easy it is to fall into this trap, I would prefer that OEA seek opportunities that's more about systemic change and long-term investment than kind of like chasing money to do particular things and build organizational clout because of that.
Yeah, if I can also just touch on that too. Absolutely, Alex. I think one of the things about and I'm sorry for throwing that term around without defining. I was taking for granted that people had heard that before. I think the thing about white saviorism is that what it does is it still keeps the dominant culture in the dominant position. And that doesn't change anything. I think when doing with really forces people to work in tandem together. And that is when I had mentioned in the beginning, that's one of the difficulties of this work is there's such a paradigm, there's such a narrative, there's such a shift in thinking and being that it's all very new. And one of the things I said, I believe Karen Gaffney of the Hunterdon County Anti-Racism Coalition might be on this call. We were talking about this last week, and I was sharing the difference between sharing the difference between what it means to create space and make room. And those are two very different things. And I think that the doing with is making room. The doing for is creating space. And that kind of reeks of separate but equal. We're going to give you guys everything. We're going to set something up so you can have your own space. That's not addressing the JEDI issues, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think the white savior thing can serve as a way to assuage guilt, a way to say, well, we're doing things, and then turn around and blame the very communities you're trying to help in two ways. First, by doing this because they don't respond in the way that you want them to. And secondly, it gives you the opportunity to victimize the same groups year after year after year, because you're not working towards anything that creates systemic change. And that is why we're very committed to being a do with.
And I want to expand on that really quickly, Renata, because I'm thinking about some of the conversations we've had, and some people have been real with us and been like, the kids that you're trying to recruit have people falling over themselves to provide free programs and services, and like we totally get the free part and why that needs to be part of it. But at the same time, if you're in a do with position, you have to people need to have some type of skin in the game, whatever that looks like. So we've had challenges in our programs, you know, kind of maybe the do for attitude kind of creeping in. We're like, all right, it's going to be free, and then it's hard to give away stuff for free. It's very difficult to give stuff away for free. So as much as the work is about addressing and remediating historical divestment and inequity, it's also about kind of restoring I guess maybe like the tools that allow for self-determination. So Renata had used that term in regard to agriculture. So I guess there's this kind of tension between, you know, we want to address these inequities, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people are positioned to have ownership of what's going on in their community. And you know, sometimes there can be a little bit of a tension there. We've experienced that in our programs a little bit.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I mean, and that's definitely one of the things that we fight against, because we certainly have kids or have people remind us that there are groups that just give kids stuff. Like for us, because we pay our interns, you know, you don't show, you don't get paid. That's it. We make everything. We try to create a program where we address the equity issues. Like, you know, we've got the kids coming from, the private schools and the suburbs who never have issues getting to the field trips or anything like that. They either have their parents drive them or they have their own cars. We know that's not true for everybody. So we have to rent vans or pick people up in our personal vehicles and bring them to these places. And we let kids know, I mean, you know, this is an investment in time. So we treat them right. We treat them like they're valuable. And we ask them to treat us the same way. And it really is, as Alex said, it is a learning curve, because a lot of the organizations and programs that are due for kind of rob people of that. So when there is a requirement, you know, they kind of look at you, well, oh, we'll go to this program. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, okay. But the kids who've been involved, the interns that we have involved, that have been involved with our internships have really, Alex is right. We've had some interesting encounters, but for the most part, it's really been, you know, a lot of waking up, a lot of awakening for these interns, and maybe for their parents and the systems, the school programs and other things that they're coming from. So
I want to jump back real quick to Christine's question about Princeton's land use plan and the conservation and recreation space element. I was remembering the city of Trenton's outreach and community engagement for Trenton 250. And one of the things that I liked about the plan is that it wasn't just talking about land use out of context, but it characterized you know, some initiatives in the master plan and goals of the master plan as part of this broader network of community initiatives. So at the time that Trenton 250, the initial outreach and engagement and the master plan were being developed, I was leading the My Brother's Keeper initiative in the city of Trenton. And even though, you know, that initiative wasn't like really directly connected to Trenton 250, kind of building support for these elements in the plan became part of my responsibilities as the person leading that initiative. So I think that a couple things. It's critical that any elements in the plan kind of be connected to broader community engagement organizations or initiatives or strategies, because I think it'll kind of bring people slowly into the process. You can't just go to somebody who's maybe living in a historically divested neighborhood or sees themselves as disconnected to the majority, and say, hey, participate in this. There really needs to be a relationship building process. So there's that. And then the other piece is that I really think it's important, super critical, that people are able to see nature as embedded in their communities and part of their everyday experience. So now I'm able to walk outside and I see how I am part of nature. Whereas previously, when I was living in Trenton, I went outside and I was like, this is like people. Nature is not part of this landscape. And then I'm going to go to this other place for there to be nature. I really don't like perpetuating the idea that, you know, this is a space for nature when the space for nature is everywhere. So I just think that that's something that's really important to emphasize, and something that it bothers me when I see that, and I still fall into it myself. I'm like, no, nature is everywhere. Your connection to nature is everywhere, and you have a responsibility to kind of build that into your everyday experience and help people build that into their everyday experience as well.
I wanted to address Mary Susan Gregson's comment. She says, what has been the reaction from parents of kids who have participated in the programs? So before our internships start, we have an orientation session. And that is where we bring all the kids who've been accepted into the program together. And they get a chance to hear a bit more about the program. They get a chance to meet each other. They eat pizza, and they play a game. They play like a team building game. And while that is going on, we also invite parents and guardians, school administrators, guidance counselors, the people who run particular programs to sit in another space. And there we get an opportunity to address them about what the program is, why the program is, who we are. And real talk, we've had a lot of positive feedback from parents who are really, really grateful for the program. The parents that you think would show up are often the parents that do show up. The parents that we would hope would show up are often the ones who don't show up. So I'm gonna leave y'all to suss that out. I think you can pretty much guess what I'm saying and who I'm speaking about. What we do find is that for a lot of the kids from the more urban areas whose parents may not be or guardians may not be around, they're program heads. Ayana Richardson from Timbuktu Academy. She has a bunch of girls in the program, and she often comes. She calls me every couple of weeks to find out what we're doing. If there's a problem with the girls, she's the one we call. There are a few parents that we had one student who was an immigrant from Latin America. His parents didn't speak English, but they came to the orientation and to the graduation, and we made sure we had an interpreter there to interpret for people. And also, I think Alex and some others encouraged the kids who might have struggled in English to speak in Spanish, which I thought was amazing, especially for the people who didn't speak Spanish. They had to sit and they had to hear someone express themselves in a language that they didn't know. And I thought that was powerful. So we have parents who are really behind it. We'd love to get more parents involved, but I'm grateful for the ones that have come out. So I guess that's the best answer I have for that. Mary Christine, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. I have one last question for you. I don't know if it's cheating because you've asked us to reflect on what we we would do to support the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
But I'd like to ask what you would like people to do to support, to work with you, or to support the work of the Outdoor Equity Alliance, because you have a lot of amazing programs, and I imagine a finite bandwidth. So,
Renata, let me take this question. The real answer to this is that we need additional funding support to support Renata and other staff to build the relationships that are the backbone of OEA. So at this point, I don't want to say it's easy, but we are more experienced in delivering programs. But what we would like to do is take that next step to make sure that we can provide long-term and ongoing support to community groups to actually implement ag and conservation projects in their community. And it's just something that happens over time, and you work with people to do that. And it might take some time to get to the point where you're actually able to do that. So I would say that that's our biggest need right now, right? We have the internships, and we're kind of hitting a broad range of people, kind of, building values related to conservation and agriculture, and a culture of doing that. But really the follow-up, making sure that people have the skills, knowledge, and tools to actually do this in their own community, and that they're being supported to do it. That's the hard part. It's a relationship building part. It's a long-term funding. It's a long-term relationship thing. It's hard. And it just takes time and effort to do that. And Renata has been incredible in relationship building, reaching groups that we would not have the capacity or time to reach otherwise. So the big thing, operating support to continue relationship building.
And the other thing is, we have a website up now. It's under construction. There's lots of opportunities that for you guys to get our newsletter, and you can reach us. And I tell people, I understand if you've got a question, if you've got something, a comment, something that you think we should think about. I'm sorry. You can always drop me a line. My phone number and all that stuff is on my card, and I'll give that stuff to Linda. You can always, my email is rbarnes, B-A-R-N-E-S, the letter R, B-A-R-N-E-S @njoea.org. Alex, is yours the same? Do you have you have the same one?
I don't have an OEA email, but I'll just put
Okay.
my email in the chat.
Okay, great. You can always reach out to me. We love to come out and share what we're doing. We love to work with people. I will talk to anybody about this and find ways to work together. I have never seen such an opportunity that's mutually beneficial in any organization that I've worked with, and I'm grateful for that. So Alex is definitely right. Our funding budget, but also we want some bodies. We want some volunteers who want to come and come with me to these tabling events, and you can sweat off 15 pounds like I have this year out in the sun, talking about the OEA. Yeah, we'd love for you to visit some of our partners and to see the work they're doing, the folks at Capital City, Tyrell Smith of the Smith Family Foundation and their garden up at Lamberton Street. Certainly to support our partners, Matt Conver over at Cherry Grove Farm, How Living Farm, Tamia over at Wildflower Farm. And I'm gonna send Linda and Kim these addresses for these groups, so you guys can go and check these out as well, and a book list as well of stuff that we're doing. You can always reach me and I will return your email or your phone call or your text.
Real quick, I wanna give a shout out to Matt Conver, because when I left my job with the city of Trenton with no game plan, Matt Conver hired me as a farm intern at his farm on Carter Road. and he has continued to be supportive of people like me through his involvement in the agri-hood internship. So I have a lot of love and appreciation for Matt and what he does. Please go to his farm CSA as well if you're not familiar with him. 1 to 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I think his address is like 11 Carter Road or something.
Wow, talk about the shameless plug. Go ahead, Alex.
I don't get anything for promoting Matt. I just got a lot of love for what Matt, how Matt supported me at a critical time in my life.
Oh, great, great. So if you guys have any more questions, we'd love to answer some more. If you want to hear more about the OEA, good grief, I've done a few podcasts for New Jersey Audubon, their coffee segment. If you go New Jersey Audubon Coffee, our podcast is To Change a Narrative. The Pinelands Nursery and Supply just did a podcast about where they interviewed me, and we had just some great conversations around equity. So support these things. You guys come out and visit, give me a call. I'd love to spend time with you. I'd love to see you all out visiting our interns at our programs. And we've got a Kwanzaa celebration coming up, and it might be a fundraiser. So I'd love for you guys all to come out and check that out. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata and Alex, for an excellent presentation and the beautiful and meaningful work that you do. I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of your evening to be with us here tonight for continuing conversations. And of course, continuing means that we'll be gathering again next month. In September, we're going to be meeting on Tuesday instead of Monday because of the Labor Day holiday. For our conversation on Tuesday, September 6th at 7 p.m., we will be hearing from Dr. Natalie Edmond on the topic, The Somatics of Being a Racial Being. Here's a brief description of the discussion. We hold being racial beings in our bodies, and that gets passed down through the generations. White people as a collective tend not to see themselves as racial beings. So when invited in or called out about whiteness, they don't have the capacity or haven't built the muscle to have meaningful dialogues about race and how to be anti-racist. This conversation will explore what unexamined whiteness looks like somatically and how bodies of color also hold racial trauma in their bodies. Dr. Natalie Edmond is a licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in the treatment of trauma and the mind-body-spirit connection. She's also a yoga teacher and an anti-racism consultant and takes an embodied approach to everything she does. It should be a really great conversation, and I want to encourage you to take what you've learned here in the space tonight into the rest of the spaces in your life and to come back next month with a friend. Thank you again to Renata and Alex and to everyone for coming out and to the Princeton Public Library for their continuing partnership. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.